Okay, good afternoon. I'm Efrat Morin from the Hebrew University, and the presentation is with my students, Hagit Yakir, Nadav Peleg, and Matan Karklisky. My research is mainly hydrometeorology in the context presented in this slide. I'd like to understand the relationships between precipitation fields that are forced by meteorological conditions and climatic conditions, and their impact on flash flood generation in a catchment that is, of course, has some surface conditions in some geographical settings. And this is, my main research field is in these interactions here. And in the context of this workshop, I'm very much interested in patterns. And actually, patterns are apparent in precipitation fields and in all other mediums here. Now, this is, of course, not a new research field, and a lot of research conducted in this, on these issues. And it's very well known that space-time distributions of precipitations play a major role in runoff generation process. Yes, patterns matter, we know this. It's known for many years. And it's also known that the standard rain gauge network do not represent well precipitation patterns. And to date, actually, radar data are the best information we have to represent the patterns of precipitation, mainly in catchment larger than a few square kilometers. And this is why we see quite many studies that use the radar data that, as I said, represent very nicely the patterns of precipitation as input into hydrological models. That hydrological model that represents the processes that occur in the catchment. And myself, but many others, did this connection. Now, what I'm concerned with is that we have many studies, and the question, if we ask ourselves, did we learn anything new on the processes, and what happened in the catchments from all these studies, having this very nicely representation of precipitation patterns? I'm not so sure what is the answer. What we have learned new about the role of patterns on runoff generation processes? We have maybe better prediction. We do have better prediction because we have better data, but not sure we really learned anything new. And that brings the question, what we can learn from patterns and how we can learn from patterns, because this is what we want to know. This is what we want to learn. And one of the things I was thinking about is that actually, yes, radar data represent pattern, and we can view these patterns in our eyes, but when we input this into a hydrological model, in a way we actually we refer them actually as quite a very dense rain gauge network, because we input it as gridded data, and we not explicitly represent the patterns. We implicitly represent the pattern. We not explicitly represent the patterns. And one of the things I was thinking is that if we could explicitly represent the patterns, we maybe can learn something new about the impact of precipitation on hydrological response. And this is what I was trying to do, and had some idea to do that, and this is what I will try to present in this presentation. So what are actually these patterns of precipitation? We see this core of, that's 3 radar data images, and we see these cores of precipitation, and actually this is quite a large, a good organization here. And what we see actually is the precipitating elements, which in case of desert and many other places, it's convective rain cells. Okay, and these convective rain cells are related to some element, a real element, a physical element. Many times it will be a thunderstorm. So explicit representation of patterns could be explicit representation of these elements, of these convective rain cells in our hydrological models. So rather than use the standard approach, putting radar data as gridded information, implicitly represent patterns in the model, what I was trying to do is represent these convective rain cells, extract them from our data, and input these hydrological the rain cell data into our model. That means we have a direct linkage between the convective elements and the catchment hydrological response represented by the model. You can call it like object-oriented approach to learning about the hydrological processes from the convective rain cells. So it requires several steps. We have first to characterize the convective rain cell to see what are the shape, what is the dynamic, and then find a nice way to model them, to represent them with some function, and at the end to relate them to with the hydrological response and see if we learn anything new. The characterization, here we did a study of radar data of several years in the southern part of Israel, in the blue area, in the green area. I would not get into too many details, but we had like a segmentation. We found the cells. We fitted ellipsoid to each cell, and we measured many characteristics of these elements, the area, orientation, radius, many other. And we have distributions of these characteristics. The blue lines refer to the little bit more northern area, and the green is to the southern area. This is the area of the cells. Note most of them. Most of the convective rain cells are up to 100 square kilometers, which is important for later. The maximal rain intensity, the ellipticity. If it was circles, it would be 1. So you see they are really ellipsoid. They are not circles. And it's really, there is no difference between south and the west. And the preferred orientation, mainly in the north, we see some preferred orientation. And we have a lot of details in this paper about it. So this was the first part, characterization. Then modeling. So as I said, we fitted ellipsoid to them. So we replaced the grid data with the convective rain cells representation. We have used a model called HiCells by Farrell et al. From 2003, which is a combination of a Gaussian function with an exponential function. The Gaussian represents the rapid decay of rain rate from the middle to the outside, and then more slowly decay rain rates. This is in terms of space, and you see all these parameters of course, must be found from the data. This is the model parameters, if you wish. And in terms of dynamic, we assumed like a constant speed in a given direction for some lifespan. And so we had this model, and then we can feed this model to data and replace the gridded data with this representation. Okay, now I want to show the application of this approach for one case study. The case study is a flash flood in a catchment that's quite close to here. This is Beersheba, and it's called the Becker catchment. You see it here. Semi-arid area, almost 100 square kilometer. And the storm is December 93. You see, this is the radar data for the storm. It's very typical that we have very high rain depths at a small area and much lower if we move away from the center. This is the flood hydrograph of this event, which was the fourth observed in this catchment, and this is the one we analyzed. We had a hydrological model for this catchment representing the most important processes occur in this catchment, which is infiltration excess mechanism to generate rainfall excess, then kinematic routing of the flow to the channels, and then in the channels, transmission losses are quite important in this region. For this analysis, we calibrated the model for this case study, and we used it to represent the hydrological response. So we fitted our rain-cell model to the data, the radar data. We identified 56 convective rain cells, and we see sample distribution of the different characteristics. Cell area, this is, remember, it's extreme storm, so we see the area is quite large. The maximum rain intensity, lifespan, this is the average. It's very typical, very short duration. These convective rain cells last for short time, and the speed they move on average is 6-point-something meter per second. Okay, now before I go on, I have to present that it's okay to replace the regular rather gridded data with the convective rain cell data without and still have a good prediction of the hydrograph. So to check this, we once input the radar data as input to our model, and we used this rain cell model as input. So we compared these two input models. We looked on the computed one of hydrograph, and we found it was a good match. So this is the computed hydrograph, one with the original radar data and one with the rain cell data. And the conclusion was, okay, so this rain cell model represents well enough the essential information in terms of hydrology, and it's okay to use this approach for analyzing the hydrological response. So I think now I get to the more interesting part of the analysis. Now I want to start to use this approach really to understand what happened in this event. What was the major factors that generate this very large flood? And that was the intention of all this, taking this approach. So we have 56 convective rain cells. So one thing we can do is starting input each cell individually or combinations of cells. And what we found out was that actually out of the 56, there is one major cell that was responsible for this flash flood. Without it, there was no flood. Maybe there was not even a flow. And this we did by really inputting each cell separately. And actually, if we remove this cell, there was no flow according to the model. This cell by itself, this one convective rain cell out of the 56 by itself would generate this hydrograph. This is the full hydrograph with the whole 56 cell. This is only one cell. Of course, the 55 other were important to make to wet the soil. It's not linear, of course, not linear response. So the difference between this and this is the effect of the other cells. But without this one major cell, we wouldn't have actually a flow. So, and this is the cell. This specific cell, we see its characteristics. It's quite large in size. It's quite long. It's relatively, if you remember, the average was 13 minutes, so it's a relatively long duration, and the speed is relatively slow, which is very, very important. I will show this. So first, we identify that this is one convective rain cell that was responsible for this flash flood. Now we can also do some sensitivity analysis, and we can do sensitivity analysis to properties that has some meaning. Okay, has some meaning, and we can take this convective rain cell and try to see what was so important. And so what we checked is the sensitivity to the location of the cell, to the direction it moves, and to its speed. So this is, again, the convective rain cell. It moves, it starts here, it moves to this direction in a speed of 4.2 meters per second. Now what you see here, this is the peak discharge in the outlet. The outlet is here. The peak discharge that it would get in the outlet if the cell would start at any other point. So the color is the peak discharge at the outlet. It starts originally here. Only 5 kilometers aside, the discharge would be doubled. Just by very small shift in place, the discharge would be doubled. If we change direction, this is direction of the movement. if we change, this is the original direction. If we change direction towards more to the catchment, it will be maybe 50% more just by changing a small shift in the direction. And the speed, which is very important, this is the original. If it goes slower, of course, it's not surprising, yes, but if it goes slower, there is more rainfall in the catchment, but the peak discharge will be almost doubled. If we take all these together and do some global sensitivity, and I'm not showing you the sensitivity itself, but I can, by changing all these characteristics, and we are not changing the magnitude of the cell, we're changing the location, speed, and directions. We could, the peak discharge at the outlet could be 2 to 3 folds larger by relatively small changes in cell location, direction, and velocity. So this was one very interesting conclusion. And then we ask ourselves, okay, what is the flooding potential of this cell? Or this storm? What was the maximum flash flood it could generate without changing its magnitude? Again, I mean, we have, yes, it's small models, we can play with it. So with this single cell, the highest peak discharge we could get was 188 cubic meter per second. This is this cell by itself. It was about 55. Taking it in the maximum configuration, it would generate almost 200. It's this one. Now, bringing back all the other 55 cells, so the soil become wetter, we get almost 280 cubic meter per second. Just to remind you, I'll go back very quickly. Okay, actually this is very close to the maximum peak discharge in these catchments in past event. Okay, so this number is actually could happen, and it happened. So this is by our definition, we said this is the flooding potential of this storm is almost 280 square kilometers without changing magnitude of the storm, just by relatively small changes in location, direction, and speed. Let's take it in a little bit larger context. We see here, we talk now only on one case study, yes, one storm in one catchment. This is the highest peak discharge observed in the desert area, desert catchments of Israel. For each catchment, according to its size, the highest peak discharge. Every other flood that was measured will be below this curve. We call it envelope curve in hydrology. And the event this is catchments almost 100. This is the observed event. And actually, by doing this, the largest configuration, we actually move this point closer to the envelope curve. This is the meaning. I mean, we are not going out of the envelope curve. We're just getting it closer to the envelope curve. And more general questions related to this is under what hydrometeorological scenarios extreme flash flood are generated in these desert areas. So we think, and I will not show it here, but we did quite a lot of analysis of other events. Actually, we think this is the scenarios that are responsible for many of these points smaller than 100 square kilometer catchment. And why 100 square kilometer catchment? Because you see most of the convective rain cells are in this range. So we think most of these points, these extreme events, these are all extreme events, were really generated when a single convective rain cell slows down, and it's very important that it will slow down. It's one of the most important properties. Of course, it has to be intense and everything else. Slows down within a drainage basin and actually bring this flash flood to some maximal value. And this is, again, a typical convective rain cell that also flood at a very large flood in Qumran catchment in the northern Dead Sea area. And maybe one thing, it's not very surprising, but looking on radar data, on radar images, actually you see quite many rain cells. It's not like you don't see single rain cell. You usually see many rain cells. But when you analyze, then when you have floods, it's really when you see one of these cells, it looks exactly like the others, but you see that this happens. When you have very large flash floods, it's actually, this is what happened. It slows down within a catchment. It has to be in the right place, in the right speed, and to generate this large flash flood. So we think this is the general scenario that happen for catchments up to 100 square kilometer. So this is, again, the more general framework we want to study now to what we want to continue, and we started already to work in this direction. So we think to better understand the processes, using this approach, we need to better understand what's happened in the catchment. We want to do a grid-based hydrological model to be able really to, during these extreme flash floods, to be able to understand if there is connectivity of flows, to learn about contributing areas and zones. And for this, we need a grid-based hydrological model. We plan to install a monitoring system in some catchment to verify in our model. And we also, in this area, these rainfall models that I talked about, it's not just, it's not just, we don't just have convective rain cells, they have some forcing. The forcing is meteorological condition and the climatic condition, so we want to relate these convective rain cells to the meteorology and climate condition. And if I have 2 more minutes, I will just want to really quick present some results from this part. And another study by Nadav Peleg, my PhD student, more northern part of Israel. And again, analysis of a large record of radar data. He analyzed many convective rain cells and fitted, again, the model. But here it was important for us also to relate it to some meteorology. And what he did, he was able to identify 3 synoptical configurations at which these convective rain cells appear. And this is as a meteorology of these convective rain cells, 3 types of synoptic configuration, if you wish. So all this, the classification of the rain cell characteristics are different for each one of the synoptic configuration. It's Mediterranean lows, deep or shallow, or active White Sea trough. And here I just present the area of the convective rain cells, the lifetime of the cells, the direction, but of course all other characteristics we have also for the other. And one of the implications of this information is to put everything in what's called a rainfall generator or weather generator, but it's weather generator of rainfall that actually will generate these convective rain cells forced by climate and meteorology. So this is working now. So you have climatic condition, we can get or for reanalysis data or for general circulation model. From this, we get this synoptic configuration by a stochastic model that generates this series of synoptic configuration forced by the climate. From this, we have this, again, stochastic models that generate these convective rain cells according to this information. And I don't know if you can see, they generate these cells, again, in a stochastic model. And right now, we can, generate a variance of storms that could happen under given climatic conditions. And that helps us to better understand this link here. So we have the actual storms. Okay, we have the different extreme storm, but we also generate many synthetic records, but high resolution synthetic record, high space and time resolution. So still a lot of things to do and under work, but to summarize, so the most important thing I want to say in this workshop that talks a lot about patterns is I think that if we can represent the patterns in explicit way, in my case, it's the rainfall structure, to explicit representation of the rainfall structure in the hydrological framework, I think we can gain new insights. And what we learned from this study is, for one case study, actually we could identify that the most important factor was one major convective rain cells out of 56. And we also understood that it could be, the flood could be even 2 to 3 times larger by small changes in location, direction, and speed. And actually, we think this is the common scenario for generated extreme flash floods in the desert of Israel, for catchments up to 1 square kilometer. And now we learn more about convective rain cell in Mediterranean climate. And I showed some results from a high-resolution weather generator. So thank you for your attention.
Questions?
Yeah.
We'll hear you, I think.
This one? Or yeah, I have it. This one?
Yeah, that one. So, as I'm sure you know, that curve with the envelope curve for the global database of floods looks very much the same. That it has an inflection point right around 100 square kilometers.
This is in
and then flattens out.
This is in log scale, so you don't see it. I just put, because this is the envelope, the word envelope curve. Yeah. In log scale, you don't see this, but yes, it's...
But what your work suggests to me is that you can actually explore why that inflection is there. You sort of suggested that it had to do with the scaling attached to the convective cells themselves. So we've written a paper with the same idea.
Okay. No, so first, you see it in general way, and this is, I think it's very much related to the size of the cells in relation to the catchments. But if you see, this is the world envelope curve. This is the Western Mediterranean, and this is our curve. And in the desert, it's go even lower. It's go more faster. And I think the two things: first, the cells are smaller, and then you have the transmission losses that even increase this effect for the desert region, compared to, let's say, this is Western Mediterranean, and this is the world envelope curve. So I think what's happened here, this shift in the large catchment, is these two processes.
More questions? Yes, please.
Yeah, so I was wondering, these two radars that cover Israel, the pixel size then on the radar, I was wondering what that was, and then what does that actually mean for rain on the ground? Because seems that the details, obviously, for your storm, it's a lot of water, but it's
the rain on the ground. Yeah. Okay, these are C-band radars, and the pixel depends on the distance. Will be in this distance will be probably already 3 square kilometers or something like this, quite large. And of course, also it's not, of course, on the surface. It's maybe can be 1 or 2 square kilometers above surface, and rather, of course, it can be a full talk. There's a lot of uncertainty because of this, because we don't really see rain on the surface, but it's calibrated. So we calibrate the radar data by using rain gauge data. So it's, the best estimation we have, but we should put quite large uncertainty. So the size is about 2-3 square kilometers. We have now installation of 2 new X-band radars that have very high resolution, much higher resolution, but only for 30 kilometer radius, that are installed from the last season, and then we'll be able to be more details. But for the convective rain cells, I think it's not so bad, this resolution. No, did I answer your question? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
More questions?
Envelope again. It's based on how many years of observation?
It's many years. Some of these numbers were from hydrometric stations. Some of them were when you have extreme events, you go out and have post-event analysis. So we have data, maybe some of them even from, could be 50 years ago, or some shorter duration. So it's everything you can find. There is not one station, but it's spread maybe on 50 years or so.
Okay, I think with that, any... Okay, thank you very much, Efrat.